Millionaire took his dying son to the hospital and found the doctor was his. Welcome to Alcot Stories, where every tale is crafted straight from the heart. I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, I have a deeply emotional story for you. A tale of love, loss, and the powerful bond of family. What happens when a man who's lost everything gets a second chance? And when betrayal and lies tear apart a once perfect love, can they rebuild their family? This journey is full of twists, tears, and heartwarming moments that will leave you thinking long after the last word. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. I write these stories with the deepest part of my heart, pouring my emotions into every word. If you enjoy my voice, my stories, and the emotions I bring to life, please support me by subscribing to my channel, like this video, and share it with your friends and family so we can keep growing together. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching me from? Drop a comment below and let me know. I can't wait to hear from you. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Let's dive in. The rain came down in sheets, blurring the city lights as Ryan Carter burst through the hospital doors, soaked to the bone, his tailored coat clinging to his powerful frame as he cradled his unconscious son in his arms. The storm outside mirrored the terror flooding his chest, and the weight of Liam's fragile body made his knees weak with helplessness. Blood stained the small boy's shirt, a sickening contrast to his pale face, and Ryan's heart pounded with a ferocity he hadn't felt since the day his life had fallen apart 5 years ago. Nurses rushed toward him, urgency flashing in their eyes, but all he could focus on was the limpness of his son's tiny hand against his chest. "Please," he choked, his voice cracking under the pressure. "My son! He's not breathing right. Help him." The ER bustled around him, but everything felt like a slow-motion nightmare, a blur of voices, stretchers, and glaring white lights. Paramedics took Liam from his arms, but the cold absence left Ryan feeling hollow, like part of him had just been ripped away. His hands trembled, fingers stained crimson, the blood of his only child mixing with the rain. He staggered back against the wall, gasping for air as doctors and nurses swarmed. It was never supposed to be this way. He had sworn to protect Liam from every hurt, every scar, every pain. His driver had lost control during the storm. One slick turn and their car had slammed into the guardrail, and now Liam's life hung by a thread. As the nurses wheeled the gurney down the corridor, a voice paged overhead for the hospital's top pediatric surgeon. The name floated through the air like a ghost from the past, Dr. Amara Bennett. Ryan didn't hear it, not fully. He was too wrapped in the chaos of panic and prayers, too haunted by memories he'd buried deep. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes tightly, trying not to scream, trying to stay strong, though every second without news felt like torture. Meanwhile, in the surgical wing, Amara's pager buzzed insistently, calling her in for a case she had no idea would shatter the walls she'd spent years rebuilding. She tied her curly hair into a surgical cap and slipped into her scrubs with the mechanical focus of someone trained to shut out the world. She didn't know the boy's name. She didn't know who had carried him in soaked and bloodied. She only knew there was a child on the table whose life depended on her hands. As she scrubbed in, she ignored the tired ache in her legs, the migraine brewing behind her eyes, the pang of loneliness that sometimes crept in during quiet nights. The nurses briefed her quickly. "Boy, approximately 5 severe internal bleeding. Trauma from a car accident." She nodded, calm and unreadable, her professional armor in place. The OR lights were bright, clinical, merciless, but she didn't flinch. She had saved dozens of children before. This would be no different. The child lay still on the table, his tiny chest rising in shallow breaths, and something about him tugged at her, an unexplainable pull beneath her ribs. She brushed it off. "Focus, Amara, save him." Outside the OR, Ryan sat slumped in a hard plastic chair, eyes wide, fingers gripping his hair as regret gnawed at his soul. Why hadn't he insisted on staying home during the storm? Why hadn't he buckled Liam in tighter? Why had he ever thought he could raise this child alone without her? His mind flashed with images of the woman he once loved, her laughter, her strength, her scent, her tear-streaked face the last time he saw her. But that was a lifetime ago. She was gone, and he had convinced himself she'd never return. As the hours stretched like years, the pain in his chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. He didn't know what hurt more: watching his son fight for life, or being completely powerless for the first time in his wealthy, invincible life. Down the hallway, Amara hovered over the tiny body, her hands moving quickly, skillfully, heart pounding harder with every second. She was calm, but something in the child's face felt achingly familiar. She had to push the thought away. A child's life depended on her. There was no time for ghosts. But as she adjusted the surgical light and tilted the boy's hip to check for internal injuries, her breath caught. There, nestled just above the skin of his side, was a crescent-shaped birthmark, delicate and unmistakable. The world stopped. Her hands froze. Her throat tightened. That mark. She had seen it once, on an ultrasound image years ago. Just before the night, her world crumbled. Her knees went weak, and her heart twisted into something unrecognizable. She blinked, her mind fighting reason, emotion crashing over her like waves. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. Yet the mark was there, real and undeniable. This child, this boy, was not just any patient. He was hers. The son she had mourned, the child she was told had died. The truth slammed into her with the force of 1,000 storms. Her vision blurred, but her hands didn't fail. She finished the procedure, each stitch laced with shaking breath and silent sobs trapped beneath her mask. When the monitors finally steadied, and the child's heartbeat stabilized, relief flooded her like sunlight after endless darkness. She stared at his face, tears gathering in her eyes. How had this happened? Why hadn't she known? Who had lied to her? She couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. As the surgical team prepared to exit, she peeled off her gloves, numb and shattered. Outside, Ryan stood as the doors opened, expecting a stranger, a doctor, a miracle worker. Instead, his world tilted off its axis. There she was, the woman he'd never stopped loving, the one he'd lost too soon. His knees buckled, and he dropped as if the weight of every mistake, every lie, every broken promise had finally crushed him. "Amara," he whispered, his voice raw and disbelieving. Her eyes met his, filled with the same pain, the same history. No words were spoken, but everything had changed. The storm outside had passed, but inside, the storm had only just begun. The silence in the operating room grew thick as Dr. Amara. Bennett stared at the crescent-shaped birthmark, the scalpel still in her gloved hand, hovering in mid-air, trembling now like a leaf clinging to its branch in a storm. The beeping of machines faded into the background, drowned beneath the tidal wave of realization crashing over her. That tiny mark, shaped like the moon she used to dream beneath, once appeared on a screen when she was filled with hope, excitement, and a love she believed was unbreakable. Her chest rose and fell rapidly beneath her surgical gown, and her vision blurred, not from exhaustion, but from the tears she refused to let fall. Her hands, once steady with certainty and skill, now shook with raw disbelief as she forced herself to continue, knowing that hesitation could cost the boy, her boy, his life. She stitched carefully, but her fingers burned as if they knew they were touching blood that shared her own. Her mind screamed 1,000 questions, but her lips stayed sealed behind the surgical mask, professionalism battling the mother within. Her thoughts raced. How was he alive? Who lied to her? Why did they take him? Was this divine punishment or a cruel joke? She dared not look at the other, nurses, for fear that one glance would crack the dam of composure. She was barely holding together. The boy's eyelashes fluttered once as she adjusted the light. His tiny body so delicate, yet so achingly familiar. She finished the procedure with robotic grace. But inside she was unraveling thread by thread, every stitch echoing the lost heartbeat of the life she once mourned. When the final suture was tied and his breathing stabilized, Amara took a step back, her knees weak as the sterile floor threatened to collapse beneath her. She peeled off her gloves slowly, mechanically, like someone watching themselves from outside their body. The surgical mask suddenly felt suffocating, as if it was trapping every scream she couldn't release. The nurse asked if she was okay, and Amara could only nod, fearing that a single word would shatter her into pieces. She walked out of the OR as if in a trance, each step heavier than the last, heart thudding louder than the footsteps behind her. Then the doors parted, and there he was, Ryan, the man whose betrayal haunted her sleep, the man who once kissed her belly and promised forever. Their eyes locked, and for a second the entire hospital melted away. His expression was a whirlwind of recognition, disbelief and pain, and her heart twisted violently at the sight of him down on his knees. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Her pulse pounded like thunder in her ears as memories clawed their way to the surface. Ryan's voice whispering baby names in the dark, his arms around her as she cried. The moment she was told their baby had been lost, and the day she was forced to walk away. Her lips trembled, but she stayed frozen, the hallway suffocating in its silence. Nurses glanced between them, sensing a history too heavy to speak aloud. Ryan slowly stood, his eyes never leaving hers, and though his mouth opened to speak, no words came, only the ghost of a man wrecked by regret. Amara's gaze dropped to the floor, unable to meet the ocean of questions swirling in his stare. She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to collapse into his arms and sob for every year stolen. But instead, she turned away, barely able to keep her legs from buckling beneath her. She rushed to the staff lounge, locked the door, and leaned against it, chest heaving as sobs tore from her throat like floodwaters breaking through a dam. She slid to the ground, hugging her knees, as her heart shattered all over again, not just for herself, but for the boy in that room who had no idea his mother was alive, present, and had just stitched his flesh without knowing his name. Her hands covered her face as the past slammed into her like a freight train, his mother's threats, the coldness of the hospital administrator, the cold, cruel voice that told her the baby had been lost during complications. She had trusted them, she had believed, and now she knew someone had taken her baby from her, lied to her, destroyed her. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it a fire ignited. Someone had stolen her motherhood, stolen her son, and left her to rot in grief while raising him in secrecy. Rage and love collided inside her chest, fusing into something fierce. She stood up slowly, wiping her tears with trembling hands, determination slowly rising like a phoenix from ashes. Her voice may have cracked, her heart may be shattered, but her instincts as a mother had returned with a vengeance. She looked into the mirror, meeting her own teary eyes, and whispered, "They took everything from me, but I won't lose him again." She stepped out of the lounge with shoulders squared, storm still raging in her soul, knowing the truth would not stay buried for long. Ryan was waiting, and the answers, along with the reckoning, were coming. The hallway buzzed with the low hum of hospital monitors and muffled voices. But for Ryan, everything had gone silent the moment Amara's words echoed in his ears like a forgotten prayer resurrected. That boy, he's my son too, isn't he? The weight of her gaze struck him like lightning, filled with betrayal, longing, confusion, and a mother's instinct rising from the grave of false loss. His mouth opened, but his voice cracked under the pressure of so many buried truths clawing their way to the surface. "Yes," he finally breathed, barely able to meet her eyes, guilt bleeding from every syllable. "He's your son, Amara. He's our son." Her breath hitched, and she staggered back half a step, as though the words had sliced through her skin. His knees hit the floor once more, this time not from shock, but from sheer emotional collapse. He wasn't kneeling in front of a surgeon. He was kneeling before the woman whose soul he helped break, the mother of his child he let vanish into memory. Her name trembled on his lips again, as if saying it might undo the years between them. "I thought you left me," he whispered, barely audible. "I thought you gave up." Amara shook her head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping her lips, wet with unshed tears. "They told me he died, Ryan," she said, her voice raw with pain. "Your mother told me my baby was gone. She told me I wasn't good enough for your name. And I believed her because I loved you." The words hit him like bullets, His face drained of color as the magnitude of the deception unraveled. He swallowed hard, trying to process the horror of what she had just said. No, that can't be true. She wouldn't. But even as he spoke, the pieces of the past began to assemble like shards of broken glass finding their way home. His mother's cold warnings, the sealed medical reports, the silence Amara left in. It all made devastating sense. Amara stepped forward, trembling, but her voice no longer cracked. It rose, full of fury and sorrow. Do you know what it's like to mourn a child who isn't dead? To scream into pillows, to beg God for answers and get nothing but silence? And all this time he was alive, growing, needing me. And you kept him from me. Ryan shook his head furiously, tears spilling down his cheeks. No, Amara, I swear to you, I didn't know. They told me you disappeared, that you gave up, that you couldn't handle the pain. She scoffed, and though her body shook, her spine stood straight with the strength of a woman who had survived fire and came out steel. They lied to both of us, she said, voice hardening like ice cracking under weight. But you didn't look for me. You believed them. You left me to grieve alone while you raised my son without even telling me. His hands clenched into fists against the cold tile as shame surged through him. I failed you, he whispered, eyes shut tight. I failed him. Amara crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together, the scent of antiseptic and memory choking the air between them. And now you expect me to just accept this? She asked, eyes glinting with fresh tears. To smile because fate decided I got to hold him again. Ryan slowly stood, inches from her now, and everything in his expression begged for redemption. No, I don't expect forgiveness, he said, voice trembling with sincerity. I just want a chance to explain, a chance to let you be his mother, a chance to fix what I broke. Her breath hitched again, this time from the sheer force of emotion rising inside her like a dam ready to burst. I don't even know who I am around you anymore, she confessed, her voice cracking. Am I a surgeon, a mother, a stranger to my own son? Ryan reached out slowly, unsure if his touch would burn her or heal her. You're everything, Amara, you always were. The confession lingered between them like a sacred offering, delicate and dangerous. Her eyes searched his face, not for love but for truth. And when she saw the pain mirrored in his eyes, something inside her softened, but it did not break. She stepped away, her heart aching, her soul a battlefield of what was and what could have been. This doesn't change what happened, she said quietly, but it changes everything going forward. He nodded, knowing that earning her trust would be a road paved with patience, honesty, and pain. Let me walk that road, he said gently. With you, for him. They stood in that corridor, two people wrecked by the same storm, trying to gather pieces of a life fate had scattered years ago. Behind them, the OR doors slowly swung shut, leaving the ghosts behind. Ahead, the future waited, uncertain, terrifying, but no longer built on lies. The silence in the private consultation room wrapped around them like fog, thick with unspoken pain, their bodies sitting still while their hearts battled with every beat. Amara sat on the edge of the hospital couch, hands clenched tightly in her lap, the fluorescent light above them humming faintly as though it, too, was straining to hear what was about to be said. Ryan sat across from her, elbows on his knees, head lowered like a man awaiting judgment. She took a deep breath, then another, steadying her voice even as emotion pushed against her throat like rising floodwaters. Your mother came to me the night I lost the baby. She began, her voice flat at first, but cracking by the second sentence. She looked me in the eyes and said the baby didn't make it, that the Carter name couldn't handle scandal or weakness. She told me I was never meant to be a part of your world. Ryan's head shot up, disbelief etched into every line of his face. But she didn't stop. She handed me a flight ticket, told me I was to disappear and let you move on without distraction. I was barely breathing from the grief. I didn't even have the strength to question it. I was young, scared, heartbroken, and alone. Her hands trembled as she stared at them, as if they still held the weight of that plane ticket, the weight of silence. Ryan's lips parted, the color draining from his face, his knuckles whitening as he clenched his fists. She lied to you. She lied to me, he said, voice strained and filled with fury. "I was told you left without a word, that you couldn't handle the loss, that you didn't want to stay tied to a broken dream." Amara met his gaze, eyes sharp with grief and fire. "And you believed it." He flinched, the truth hitting him harder than any physical blow ever could. "I was blind," he whispered. "I was too trusting, too stupid to see through her manipulation." Amara stood and turned away, blinking back tears, her voice quieter now, sadder. "I mourned a child that was breathing. I lit candles for a baby that was still alive. I built a grave in my heart and carried it every day while I worked on other people's children, saving lives while mine was stolen from me." Ryan stood slowly, not daring to touch her yet, afraid any sudden movement would snap the fragile line connecting them. "I swear, Amara, if I had known, if I had even suspected, nothing would have stopped me from finding you." She turned to face him, pain written across every inch of her beautiful, tired face. "You didn't look hard enough." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Then, as if weighed by the crushing truth, Ryan stepped back and sank into the chair behind him, burying his face in his hands. "I trusted the people who raised me, and they took everything from me." Amara's voice softened, not with forgiveness, but with weariness. "I didn't come back to your world, Ryan. I created my own. I clawed my way through medical school while grieving. I worked nights that never ended, and I earned every ounce of respect I carry now, without your name or your money." He looked up at her then, admiration mingling with regret. "You became everything I always believed you were, and more." She swallowed hard, tears now slipping freely. "But I missed his first steps, his first words, his birthdays. I wasn't there to hold him during nightmares or sing lullabies when he was sick. That's time I'll never get back." Ryan stood again, his steps slow, hesitant. "He knows love, Amara, I promise you. I raised him with every bit of heart I had left. But he needs you now. We need you." Her jaw clenched, torn between fury and longing, her soul stretched across years of heartbreak. "Don't say we," she whispered. "Not yet." He nodded, accepting the wall between them, even as it cracked. "Then let me prove I'm not the same man you left behind." They stood facing each other, hearts raw and exposed. Years of love, pain, betrayal, and aching truth laid bare between them like shards of broken glass. The room felt like a confessional, a battlefield, and a second chance all at once. Amara wiped her cheeks, voice trembling. "I want to know him. I want to hold him and hear him call me Mom, but I don't know if I can forgive the people who took that from me." Ryan stepped closer, his voice low and reverent. "Start with him, not with me. Love him first. Let the rest come later." Her lips parted, and for a moment, the fire in her chest dimmed, replaced by something quieter, hope. Just a flicker, but it was enough to keep breathing. The next morning, soft light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting gentle shadows across the room where Liam lay, his tiny chest rising and falling with fragile calm as machines hummed softly around him. When his eyelids fluttered open, his brown lashes brushing against pale cheeks, the room seemed to hold its breath. His voice, faint but warm, broke the silence. "Daddy!" Ryan rushed to his side, overwhelmed with relief, his smile tight with emotion as he whispered, "You're okay, buddy. You're safe." Moments later, the door creaked open, and Amara stepped inside, wearing a clean white coat but hiding shaking hands in her pockets, her heart a tangle of emotions too vast to name. She had spent the night replaying every second of her stolen years. But now, seeing Liam awake, everything else faded. Ryan knelt beside the bed, looked at his son with a mix of awe and reverence, and said softly, "Liam, this is Dr. Amara. She's the one who fixed your tummy." The boy turned his head toward her, eyes wide and curious, taking her in with the quiet wonder only children carry, and then smiled, gentle, radiant, innocent. "Are you my angel?" he asked, tilting his head. Amara's breath caught. She blinked rapidly, trying to mask the sudden sting of tears behind a smile. But the dam in her heart broke, and a single tear slid down her cheek as she knelt beside his bed. "I guess I am," she whispered, voice trembling. She reached out slowly, brushing his hair back from his forehead, her fingers shaking as they made contact with the warmth of the sun she never knew. She'd touch again. For a moment the room dissolved, and all she saw was him, his wide brown eyes, the curve of his smile, the tiny dimple on his cheek that matched hers. In that quiet, time stopped. Over the next few days, Amara visited often, each time lingering a little longer. She brought storybooks and puzzles, and together they built castles of imagination that seemed to mend her heart one piece at a time. Liam adored her instantly, unaware of the truth that pulsed in every glance she gave him, unaware that every bedtime story she read was a silent apology for the years she lost. Ryan watched them quietly, staying in the background, respecting the space she needed to rediscover the bond that had been stolen. Amara never told Liam who she was. Not yet. She wasn't sure if her heart could survive his confusion, his questions, his wonder. But he clung to her hand without hesitation, laughed at her silly voices during stories, and whispered secrets in her ear with childlike trust, as if his soul had always known hers. One afternoon, while she drew a sun and a house with him in crayon, he looked up and asked, "Why do you come see me every day?" Her smile wavered. "Because you're very special to me," she said softly. He nodded, satisfied, and leaned his head against her arm as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She had missed so much, his first steps, his first laugh, his baby cries, but in these quiet moments, she felt like she was finally being written into the story of his life. She learned the sound of his giggle, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about dinosaurs, the way he said thank you after every sip of juice. She memorized everything, afraid to blink and miss another detail. Her heart expanded and broke all at once with every "see you tomorrow." When he asked once if she could stay forever, she nearly said yes without thinking, but she wasn't ready, not yet, to tell him the full truth. Each night, Amara would return home and cry in the quiet, the guilt of missing 5 years crashing into the joy of finding him again. She kept a journal beside her bed, writing down every word Liam said, every drawing he made, every sentence he whispered into her ear, as if collecting puzzle pieces to rebuild the years fate had stolen. Ryan watched all of it unfold from the hallway, never pushing, never interfering, and for the first time in years, he let love bloom again, not for himself, but for the fragile mother-child bond that was healing in front of him. Liam began asking for her before bed, saying her name first thing in the morning, clinging to her scarf when she left the room. And though Amara tried to stay composed, every moment spent with him was both healing and torture, because she knew, deep down, that the truth had to come soon. But for now, she let herself hold his hand without explanation, laugh with him without history, cry with him quietly when he fell asleep holding her finger like it was a lifeline. Without even knowing it, Liam had already fallen in love with the woman he'd somehow always known was his, the mother whose heartbeat had once been his lullaby. The gentle click of the hospital door closing behind Amara echoed like a whisper of fate, and Ryan, standing just beyond the threshold, watched her walk away with Liam's crayon-streaked drawing pressed to her chest, her fingers trembling slightly as if holding on to more than just paper. His heart, once guarded by pride and buried beneath years of silence, now beat wildly with a mixture of fear and longing. He had seen it in her eyes, something breaking open, something softening, and he knew he couldn't waste another moment hiding behind apologies. That evening, he sent a quiet message, asking her to meet him under the rooftop, garden canopy of the hospital where the stars peeked through city fog. She read it, stared at it for a long while, her thumb hovering over the screen, memories rushing in like a tide she wasn't sure she was ready to face. But something pulled her there, a question, a ghost of a feeling, a boy's innocent eyes that looked like both of theirs. And so she came, dressed simply, the wind tugging at her coat as she stepped onto the roof, where fairy lights strung along the railing shimmered gently, casting golden halos between them. Ryan stood waiting, not in a suit or a role, but simply as a man stripped of ego, holding 2 cups of coffee and more emotion than words could contain. "Thank you for coming," he said softly, his voice barely louder than the breeze. She nodded, unsure what to say, unsure what she even wanted to hear. The air between them pulsed with unfinished stories. "I didn't invite you here to say thank you," he added, handing her the coffee. "I invited you here because I'm still in love with you." Her breath caught as if the confession had grabbed her by the collar and pulled her backward in time. "Ryan," she whispered, unsure whether to run or reach out. He stepped closer, slow and sure, the ache in his eyes raw. "I lost you once because I let others speak louder than my heart. I won't do that again. I won't let the past steal our future, Amara." She looked away, swallowing the tears building in her throat. Memories of betrayal colliding with the fragile hope in his voice. "It's not that simple," she murmured. "I've learned to survive without you. I built walls because loving you once almost destroyed me." His eyes shimmered in the moonlight, every word she spoke, slicing deeper into his resolve. But he didn't move. "Then let me earn your trust again, one day at a time. I'm not asking for a fairy tale, Amara, just a chance." Her hand shook as she reached for the coffee cup, not to drink it, but to anchor herself. The stars above seemed to listen, silent witnesses to this unraveling and rekindling. "How do I know you won't hurt me again?" she asked, voice tight, every syllable wrapped in the weight of everything she'd endured. Ryan took a deep breath and slowly dropped to his knees, not out of desperation, but out of reverence, the same way he had knelt outside the OR, except this time with clarity. "Because I know what life feels like without you, and I never want to feel that again." Her lips parted, a protest ready, but it never came. She simply stared at him, the wind catching her curls, her heart breaking and mending all at once. "You can't fix the past," she whispered, "but you can't pretend it didn't happen either." "I don't want to erase it," he said. "I want to honor it by building something better, something true. With you, with Liam." The mention of their son's name hit her like a warm wave, and her walls trembled. She hadn't let herself imagine this possibility of healing, of choosing love again without losing herself. She took a step forward, slow but deliberate, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was walking into danger, but toward something brave. "You really still love me?" she asked, needing to hear it again. Not for reassurance, but because it had once been her lifeline. He looked up at her, eyes never wavering. "With everything in me." Silence filled the rooftop like a blanket. And then, slowly, she knelt beside him, not as a woman surrendering, but as one choosing to meet him halfway. Her hand found his, fingers lacing softly. "Then don't make promises tonight," she whispered. "Show me tomorrow." And in that fragile, flickering moment, under a sky littered with starlight and unsaid things, it wasn't a goodbye they shared, but something far more terrifying and beautiful, a new beginning. Their hands still intertwined beneath the starlit rooftop. Imara and Ryan sat for a moment longer, in the quiet peace of possibility. The silence no longer heavy with pain, but lightened by hope. Days turned into weeks, and the tentative thread between them wove slowly into something stronger. They exchanged careful messages, shared updates about Liam, and spoke in softer tones, rediscovering the language of each other's hearts. Then came the day Amara was ready, truly ready, to take her place. Not as a visitor or a stranger, but as a mother reclaiming what time had stolen. She arrived at the park on a crisp spring morning, the sun warm on her shoulders, her nerves buzzing like wings in her chest. Ryan stood by the swing set, Liam at his side, tiny hands tugging at his father's sleeve. Eyes scanning the path with anticipation he couldn't name but felt. And then she appeared. Imara's steps quickened as Liam's face lit up, his arms flying open as if by instinct, as if his soul remembered her before memory could catch up. She dropped to her knees in the soft grass, and he ran straight into her embrace, no hesitation, no questions, just the warmth of belonging. "Mommy's here now," she whispered, voice breaking as she held him close, her cheek against his, her tears soaking into his curls. Ryan stood nearby, a gentle smile breaking across his face, eyes brimming with tears that he no longer tried to hide. It wasn't just a reunion, it was restoration, a homecoming of hearts. They spent that day beneath the blooming trees, Liam's laughter filling the air as Amara pushed him on the swings, and Ryan watched her every move with quiet reverence. Time didn't erase the past, but it began healing it. They learned to co-parent not with formality, but with grace and mutual understanding. Imara and Ryan slowly built a rhythm. Sunday pancakes, school projects, storytime rotations, and each small moment layered trust between them. They talked late into the nights, shared old wounds and new dreams, their connection deepening with every glance, every shared breath. Then came the day at the courthouse, a day Tamara thought would always be tied to grief, now rewritten with hope. They stood side by side before the judge, hands almost touching, their hearts aligned. Liam sat between them, holding their fingers, smiling his toothy grin as the clerk called their names. With a pen stroke and a whispered promise, they re-registered his birth certificate, this time with both of their names inked proudly beneath his. No longer a child lost in lies, Liam was now embraced by truth. As they exited the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds, and Amara felt the weight she had carried for 5 years finally lift. That evening they gathered in Ryan's garden, no longer strangers, no longer broken. Fairy lights twinkled above them, casting a golden glow on Amara's skin as she swayed slowly in Ryan's arms, her head against his chest. He held her with a reverence that spoke of years lost and love rediscovered. "Love may bend," he whispered into her hair, "but real love never breaks." She lifted her face to his, tears sparkling in her eyes, lips curving into a soft, knowing smile. "We were never broken," she replied gently, "just waiting." The wind rustled through the leaves like the world itself exhaled. Liam danced barefoot nearby, giggling as he chased fireflies, his joy the living proof that forgiveness could bloom in the soil of pain. And as Ryan leaned down to kiss Amara's forehead, the years of heartbreak melted into something whole. They had been two souls pulled apart by betrayal, fate and silence, but love, patient and quietly powerful, had never left. It had waited in crayon drawings, in quiet hospital corridors, in whispered bedtime stories, and now it had come home. Together, under the glow of new beginnings, they stood not as pieces of a broken past, but as a family, resilient, redeemed, and finally reunited by fate.